Hold on, that's not one of ours.
It's a German fighter. Alert the tower now.
At RAF Pembrey Airfield in South Wales, on June 23, 1942, spotters swept the horizon with binoculars as a sleek German fighter sliced through the cloud cover and drifted toward the runway. Sirens should have erupted. Guns should have been tracking the intruder. Yet something about the aircraft's approach felt oddly non-threatening. The Focke-Wulf 190 touched down in a smooth, almost leisurely landing, gliding over the grass before rolling to a stop near the control tower. The engine coughed, then died. The canopy slid open. Oberleutnant Armin Faber of Jägerschwader II climbed out, removing his leather flight helmet as he studied the unfamiliar surroundings. And then everything around him snapped into terrifying clarity. The aircraft parked nearby weren't Messerschmitts, they were Spitfires. The men rushing toward him weren't wearing Luftwaffe gray, they were dressed in RAF blue. A sickening wave hit him as he realized the truth. He had just delivered Germany's deadliest new fighter, intact, undamaged, straight into British hands. What hit Faber in that instant was the same shock rippling through British intelligence headquarters across southern England. The aircraft that had been dominating the skies, shredding Allied squadrons for months, the mysterious machine that seemed nearly unbeatable in combat, was now sitting safely on an RAF airfield because one disoriented pilot believed he was landing in France. The intelligence jackpot was beyond anything Allied planners had dared hope for. And what American test pilots would uncover after getting access to this machine would forever alter how every Allied fighter confronted German aircraft for the rest of the war. For 8 relentless months, the Focke-Wulf 190, fast, vicious, brutally effective, had haunted Allied skies. When it first appeared over France in September 1941, pilots immediately understood they were witnessing a leap in German engineering. RAF squadron leader J.E. Johnson, who would later become Britain's top-scoring ace, barely escaped his first encounter. It was faster than our Spitfire Mk versus in level flight and in the dive, he recalled. It could outroll us. Its firepower was shocking. For the first time, we were utterly outclassed. The numbers confirmed the fear. In the first half of 1942, RAF fighter losses spiked sharply. Veterans who had survived the Battle of Britain were being downed by an aircraft they could neither outrun nor outmaneuver. The FW-190 could dive away from pursuers, roll faster than a Spitfire in a turning engagement, and tear aircraft apart with devastating 20mm cannon bursts. When American pilots began arriving with their P-47 Thunderbolts, they were greeted with chilling advice. Never outroll a 190. Never turnfight a 190. Never follow it into a dive. The list of warnings was long. The list of workable tactics? Almost non-existent. Allied intelligence desperately needed answers. How was this aircraft built? What weaknesses did it hide? Was there a way to counter it at all? But the wreckage from downed FW-190s was too mangled to reveal anything meaningful, until Armin Faber unknowingly placed a perfectly operational one right in their lap. Before I continue, tell me where you're watching from and whether this story is new to you. Have you heard about Faber's unbelievable mistake before? Drop a comment below. And if you're enjoying deep dive history told with this level of detail, make sure you subscribe. Your support fuels the research behind these stories. Now, back to Faber. He wasn't some green pilot. At just 21, he was already scoring victories and had built a reputation within Jägerschwader II, one of the Luftwaffe's most respected fighter wings. On June 23, 1942, he flew escort duties over the English Channel, protecting bombers striking coastal targets. Everything was routine, until the return flight. During a chaotic engagement with British fighters, Faber became disoriented. Thick clouds swallowed the horizon. The sun's angle tricked his sense of direction. And as he broke through the cloud layer and spotted green countryside below with an airfield nestled inside it, his brain made a quick and catastrophic judgment. France. Luftwaffe base. Safe to land. But he wasn't seeing France at all. He was staring down at RAF Pembrey in Wales. In hindsight, the error seems impossible. But high-speed combat often robbed pilots of spatial awareness. Cloud cover, violent G-forces, adrenaline surges, all could distort orientation. Faber had unknowingly reversed course during a dogfight, and the violent maneuvers had scrambled his internal compass. He trusted his instincts. His instincts betrayed him. And because of that single mistake, the Allies suddenly had the keys to understanding Germany's most dangerous fighter. When Faber touched down, spotted the Spitfires, and realized where he truly was, he desperately tried to restart his engine, hoping to escape before the RAF closed in. But it was already too late. Ground crews were rushing from every direction, surrounding the Focke-Wulf before the propeller could even spin. Within minutes, he was disarmed, escorted away, and British intelligence officers were circling the pristine FW-190A that now sat untouched on their runway, like a trophy dropped straight from the sky. Back at RAF command, the reaction was almost disbelief crossed with exhilaration. This wasn't just luck, it was a once-in-a-war breakthrough. Air Chief Marshal Sholto Douglas, head of RAF Fighter Command, wasted no time. His orders were immediate and absolute. Get the aircraft to the Royal Aircraft Establishment at Farnborough. Every piece of it. Every bolt. Every rivet. Test everything. And they did. Within 48 hours, Britain's best aviation minds were crawling over the German fighter. What they uncovered explained all the frustration, fear, and casualties piling up in the skies over France. The FW-190 wasn't just a new fighter. It was a brutally efficient machine built with combat practicality as its core philosophy. While the Spitfire carried the grace of elegant aerodynamic curves, the 190 was designed like a fist. Its BMW 801 radial engine churned out 1,700 horsepower, far more than the Spitfire Mk's 1,470. But it wasn't the raw power that gave it its vicious bite. It was the roll rate. This aircraft could snap from one bank to the other with razor-sharp responsiveness. That seemingly small trait changed everything in a dogfight. When a Spitfire tried to track an FW-190 through a rolling maneuver, the British fighter simply couldn't match the speed. The German pilot could flip the aircraft, reverse direction, and slide into firing position before an Allied pilot could even compensate. Captain Eric Brown, one of Britain's most skilled test pilots and later the most experienced carrier pilot in the world, flew the captured 190 extensively. His conclusion was chilling. The ailerons were light at all speeds. This aircraft could be thrown around the sky with astonishing ease. The Spitfire required finesse. The FW-190 responded like it read your mind. And the firepower, devastating. The FW-190A-3 came armed with 420mm MG 151 cannons backed by two 7.92mm machine guns. A 2-second burst unleashed more destructive energy than a Spitfire Mk-V could produce in 10 seconds of continuous fire. And the tight wing route placement meant the rounds converged into a deadly, concentrated pattern that shredded anything in front of it. Then there was the dive performance. The FW-190 was heavier, cleaner, and simply superior in a steep dive. When Spitfire pilots chased, they watched helplessly as the German aircraft pulled away like a stone dropping through water. But the revelation that came next changed everything. For all its strengths, the FW-190 had weaknesses. Big ones. And now the Allies had them on paper. That massive radial engine that gave it so much power at low altitude struggled above 20,000 feet. Cooling issues increased. Power dropped. Handling became sloppy. Meanwhile, the Merlin engine in the Spitfire thrived in thin air. The higher the climb, the better it performed. The FW-190 could outroll a Spitfire, but it couldn't outturn one in a sustained horizontal fight. If Allied pilots forced the German fighter into long, tightening turns, the advantage flipped. And perhaps the most important discovery: at high speeds, exceeding 400 miles per hour, the FW-190's controls became painfully heavy. The pilot had to fight the aircraft just to pull out of a dive. In that moment, during the pull-up, he was vulnerable. If an Allied fighter stayed close enough in the initial dive and attacked during that high-speed pullout, the German pilot couldn't maneuver quickly enough to evade. British intelligence acted immediately. Tactical bulletins flooded RAF squadrons. But the British didn't stop there. They invited the Americans. In August 1942, U.S. Army Air Forces pilots arrived at Farnborough to study the captured fighter firsthand. What they learned reshaped American air combat doctrine. Major Cass Hoff, one of the first Americans to fly the FW-190, produced a blunt, no-nonsense assessment that circulated to every American fighter group preparing for Europe. Below 20,000 feet, the FW-190 is superior. If the German pilot knows what he's doing, our advantage is altitude. Above 25,000 feet, the P-47 and the later model Spitfires dominate. Force them high, you win. Fight them low, you die. This single, brutally clear insight rewired American tactics. When P-47 Thunderbolt units entered combat in 1943, they operated at extreme altitudes. Bomber escorts climbed high. Fighter sweeps ran above 25,000 feet whenever possible. When German fighters attempted to dive into low-level fights, American pilots climbed, dragging the 190s into thin air where they lost power and their engines overheated. The captured FW-190 influenced more than tactics. It shaped aircraft development. Engineers at Wright Field began adjusting P-47 and P-51 ailerons to improve roll rate. They analyzed the 190's gun layout, adopting ideas to tighten American fire concentration patterns. They even studied the cockpit layout, praising its logical, combat-optimized German design. But perhaps the most important outcome was psychological. The FW-190 was no longer a boogeyman. It was no longer an invincible phantom dominating the skies. It had strengths. It had limits. And now the Allies knew both. By late 1943, the tide had turned. P-47s and P-51s engaged FW-190s where the American fighters thrived. High altitude. RAF Spitfire Mk.IXs, now equipped with upgraded Merlin engines, matched or exceeded the 190's performance across much of the flight envelope. Pilots on both sides finally understood what their machines were designed for, and where their advantages lay. As the months dragged on, the kill ratios finally began tilting in the Allies' favor. FW-190 losses steadily climbed as American and British pilots started applying the hard-won knowledge gained from Faber's accidentally delivered aircraft. German airmen sensed the shift immediately. The old mistakes that had once handed the FW-190 its early superiority were no longer happening. Oberleutnant Joseph Pips Priller, one of the Luftwaffe's top FW-190 aces, grumbled in late 1943 that the Americans had clearly studied their plane. "They no longer follow us into rolling scissors," he wrote in his combat journal. "They push the fight high where our engines struggle. They have learned." Throughout the entire war, Faber's captured 190 remained stationed at Farnborough, serving as the benchmark against which every new German variant was evaluated. When the FW-190 D9 Dora appeared in late 1944 with its sleek inline engine, Allied intelligence immediately compared the updated version against Faber's aircraft. They could see exactly how German engineers had attempted to overcome the altitude problems that plagued the earlier model. After the war ended, aviation scholars tried to estimate the true impact of Faber's error. What they found was staggering. The intelligence extracted from that single intact aircraft had been disseminated to thousands of Allied pilots through training manuals, instructional films, and hands-on demonstration flights. It shaped not only tactical doctrine but influenced aircraft modifications, formation strategies, and operational planning across both RAF and USAF commands. Captain Eric Brown, the man who flew more captured enemy aircraft than any Allied pilot in history, later summed it up perfectly. Faber's navigational mistake gave us the Rosetta Stone for deciphering German fighter engineering. Every strength of the FW-190 was mapped, every weakness catalogued. That single machine likely saved more Allied lives than any other intelligence breakthrough of the war. Even German intelligence couldn't ignore the irony. One Luftwaffe officer bitterly remarked, "We spent months trying to capture a Spitfire Mark 9 intact. Meanwhile, the British didn't have to lift a finger. We delivered them our finest fighter ourselves." As for Armin Faber, he spent the rest of the war in a Canadian POW camp. He survived, returned to Germany after the conflict, and lived there until 1976. Early Luftwaffe reports blamed him for the catastrophic loss, but later evaluations admitted what most pilots already understood. Combat disorientation could strike even the most skilled aviators. The deeper question was why German command assumed the British would never manage to examine a fully intact FW-190. Faber's story exposes an essential truth about warfare. Technological superiority means nothing if your enemy can break down your secrets. The Focke-Wulf 190 had represented a dramatic leap forward in fighter design when it debuted in 1941. For nearly a full year, it dominated Allied skies through superior performance and clever engineering. But that edge evaporated the moment Allied mechanics could physically inspect the aircraft. No design is perfect. Every fighter is a bundle of compromises. The FW-190's fierce low-altitude power came with crippling high-altitude weaknesses. Its blistering roll rate was balanced by heavy controls at extreme speeds. Its destructive firepower added bulk that reduced sustained maneuverability. Once Allied pilots understood these trade-offs, they could exploit them mercilessly. Today, the FW-190 sits proudly in museums. Sleek, deadly, and immortalized as one of the finest fighter designs ever built. But behind its legend lies a twist of fate. Its legacy is forever tied to the intelligence coup that exposed its secrets. In the chaos of war, one pilot's momentary confusion over the English Channel changed everything. A single navigational mistake transformed Germany's most feared fighter into an open book, an Allied field manual in the shape of an aircraft. The FW-190 that Armin Faber accidentally delivered to Britain became more than a trophy. It became a teacher, a blueprint, a guide that showed Allied engineers exactly how to counter the Luftwaffe's prized predator. And the lesson it left behind still echoes through military history. Technology matters, but understanding how to defeat that technology matters even more. Sometimes the most decisive victories aren't the ones written in smoke trails across the sky, but the ones born from a single human error that hands your enemy the breakthrough they desperately needed. The Focke-Wulf 190 could have remained a nightmare, an enigmatic killer dominating the skies with engineering brilliance and psychological terror. Instead, it became a classroom on wings, studied by every Allied pilot who would one day face it in combat. One navigational mistake, one landing at the wrong airfield, one priceless intelligence gift that reshaped the air war over Europe. That is how America got Germany's secret fighter, and how one slip in judgment shifted the balance of power in the skies. If this story fascinated you, make sure to hit like, subscribe, and share this video to keep these incredible turning points of history alive. Your support helps bring more forgotten stories to light. One moment, one mistake, one victory at a time.